Welcome back to the Word of Mouth Podcast, your weekly rundown of the business, marketing, and operational strategies shaping the modern private dental and orthodontic practice. I'm your host, Jeff, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Troy and Sarah.
It's good to be with you.
Happy to be here with you guys.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the inside-out framework, kind of how it works, what maybe some misconceptions are, and how to utilize it to grow your practice.
Yeah, and the approach that we took in coming up with this is really looking across the entire practice in finding opportunities to increase revenue and increase profitability, recognizing that the advertising or the marketing is a piece of the practice, but it's not the whole practice, and there are some other opportunities to make a practice more profitable.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot on this podcast about the areas in which the dentists are feeling this squeeze, right? There's labor, there are issues with marketing and how dental practices are marketing themselves. There are issues with dentist income and the income the practices are receiving. And so we just wanted to talk about, since there are so many areas where dentists are feeling this squeeze, there are lots of areas where they can get creative and find ways to get out of this squeeze.
Yes, Sarah, I think that the cost squeeze that we're seeing dentists feel is one of the components, the cost of labor, the cost of supplies, all of those things. We're also seeing ads get more expensive, and so the cost of acquisition is getting more expensive, and all of this on top of the fact that insurance reimbursements are staying flat while all of these costs are going up. And so dentists are getting paid basically the same that they were 10, 15 years ago, while at the same time having to spend more on those patients.
Well, and probably a compounding factor there is that Google has really, it's been very easy to get more awareness, but part of the product of that has been really a commoditization, where more and more practices have sort of duplicated what others have done, and the overall impact of that has been that practices have become fairly interchangeable. They're harder to tell apart, and when there isn't differentiation between products, this isn't just in the dental world, this is marketing generally. If there isn't differentiation, then price becomes the primary basis on which decisions are made. And, so yes, there's a lot of infrastructure issues that are impacting that as well, but there is a little bit of some self-sabotage in the industry as it relates to really not being able to differentiate from other practices. So
yeah, and I think some of that stems from an over-reliance on Google Ads. Google Ads are great. They're a great way to get patients. We certainly do not advocate for shutting off Google Ads if that's the way you're getting your patient flow and things. But the way Google Ads works is it's driving everyone to the mean. It's trying to figure out what the best way to market your practice is. And unless you're very explicit on who you're trying to attract, if you say, I just want dental patients, it will go to the mean. It will go to the people who respond easily to ads. And those are not necessarily the highest quality patients for the practice. And so that kind of over-reliance on Google, coupled with sort of the normalization of social media and trends being kind of pushed out, you kind of get this regression to the mean. And I mean, we saw it over the weekend. There's those people who climbed the Eiffel Tower and waved that black flag. And now all of a sudden that meme is everywhere. It's flooded the market. And so unless you were the first to act, you're now part of the average in terms of using that as a marketing message, just kind of as an analog.
Yeah, no question about it. And some of it also relates to the fact that promotions tend to get more click-throughs, more engagement. So as people are looking at what's working, as agencies that are focused primarily on Google Ads are looking at what is getting the most clicks, what is getting the most engagement, it tends to be promotions like cheap cleanings. And so that tends to be a strategy that they advocate for a lot of their clients. And while there's always a place for promotions, having that be a primary marketing source now is informing Google that you are a cheap cleaning provider. And once Google recognizes that that is the type of clients that or the type of patients you're looking for, even if it isn't, that's who the algorithm sends you more of. So it becomes a bit of a flywheel, self-perpetuating problem that the more kind of promotional-based marketing or advertising you do, the more you're going to get price-driven patients clicking through. So that tends to drive down the return on ad spend, which again compromises that profitability and exacerbates that squeeze that so many dentists are feeling.
Absolutely. I think the focus for dentists right now is quantity over quality. And whether it's intentional or not, this is how they're using Google Ads, is to try and push that quantity when the real goal should be that quality, those higher end cases, because that's where the money's at in dentistry right now. And there are people looking for those high end cases. It's just finding those people rather than marketing to the mean, like Jeff was talking about.
Yeah, and Troy and Sarah both bring up great points that with agencies kind of running the same playbook for dentists, you start to get a lot of the same mushy kind of messaging going out, because in order for them to scale their practice, they have to kind of do things the same. In order for them to scale their agency, they have to kind of systematize and do the same thing for a lot of their patients, which then leads to a lot of the same messaging being pushed out. And if it works for one agency, then other agencies are looking at that. They try and push out more of the same. And so not only is it Google that's kind of creating this regression to the mean, but it's also the fact that dental practices use a lot of the same agencies who use a lot of the same tactics. And so you do get kind of this squeeze from the standpoint of everyone's trying to be the best average.
Yeah. When we were talking, Jeff, in preparation for this, you brought up the idea or the analogy of Google Ads and carbohydrates from a dietary standpoint. I thought that was an interesting one. So maybe share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, carbs from a nutritional standpoint are absolutely essential to everyday life, but carbs are primarily converted to quick energy. It's not kind of that long-term ongoing energy that you get when you're in something like ketosis or burning fat for energy. When you burn carbs for energy, it's really fast and then it's gone. And that's kind of what Google Ads end up being. And as we know from all sorts of marketing around the health space, an over-reliance on carbs in your diet is what leads to unhealthy outcomes. And it's because your body doesn't have time to kind of continue to create this perpetuating machine that's oriented around what your body actually needs, which is carbs, protein, and fat.
Well, and looking at protein, for instance, the contrast between carbs and proteins, proteins don't provide that immediate energy boost that a lot of carbs, especially processed carbs, give you this great little rush. Protein doesn't do that, but protein is the building block for muscles. It's what is essential for sort of those broader systems, not just in the moment. And so it's not a perfect analogy, but an interesting analogy for Google Ads, where yes, we can turn Google Ads on and your phone will ring. So there's that immediacy. And on the one hand, that seems great, but the more exclusively reliant we are on Google Ads, a couple things happen. One, there is no permanence. We're not building anything that has sort of sustainability. As soon as you stop spending, it turns off. The second problem is a little bit systemic in just the reality of the Google Ads marketplace, which is one, there's actually only a small percentage of prospective patients that are looking as a first gateway, looking at Google, searching for dentist near me or whatever. 15 to 20% of the marketplace is what is typically reported in terms of that, the percentage of new patients that are using Google as a first search tool. So one, it's only a fairly small segment of the market that you're going after anyway. And then making that even worse is it tends to be the more price sensitive segment of the marketplace. So you're all going after, you're kind of going all in on a minority of the overall available market, and you're tending to go in on the most price conscious. So you're going to get those that tend to bounce around based on promotions or aren't going to have the same probability of accepting treatment. So there's a place for carbs, just like there's a place for Google Ads. We just have to be aware of the limitations and the dangers of relying too heavily on it.
Yeah, Troy, you brought up a good point. I think going back to that carbs analogy, using exclusively Google Ads is like eating a cookie 3 meals a day for the rest of your life. The problem's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And you are just focusing on one thing. You do need a variety of fats and protein and carbs. And that's kind of what we're focusing on in this podcast, is the variety of things you can do, not just focusing on Google Ads. But like you mentioned, Troy, the carbs are good. Jeff, you mentioned this as well. It is important. Google Ads are a way to get people in the door. It's a matter of how you approach the Google Ads and what carbs you're eating.
Yeah, and that's what we call the inside out framework. You work kind of from the inside of the practice and move out. And there's really 4 pillars to the inside out framework that we're going to go through now, which are really the keys to not just having a carb-based diet, but having a really balanced diet.
Yeah, and the way that this was derived was from our experience in operating clinics, not in the dental world, but in the healthcare world, and seeing where revenue came and where we saw that revenue leaking out. And so that's one thing that maybe differentiates our perspective from many, is this is really an operator first design. The other thing is that we don't see that marketing is different than kind of operational considerations, that there are some internal opportunities to make the marketing more effective, to make a practice more profitable and increase revenue. And then what we've seen is the better that practices get at really taking that holistic view, it's what compounds all of the efforts, both internally and on the marketing side. So that really is what drove us to develop this framework, and why the pillars that we sort of prioritize or focus on, how those were derived.
Yeah, and it really all boils down to getting referral-like patients. So it's not necessarily only targeting referrals, but the best patients for any practice are always referrals. They stay the longest, they are the easiest to treat, they accept treatment the most readily. And so creating a system that optimizes that referral-like patient, that they're not going to Google to search and try and compare and price shop. They're the ones who are coming in and feel like they are connected to your practice. That's really what this system is intended to target.
Yeah, and within it, so we can jump into kind of the 4 areas. Within it, the first one we identify is reactivating stalled patients. And I know that a lot of practices, they take the approach of, of course we're reaching out to our past patients or patients that we haven't seen for 12 plus months. But as we have analyzed practices and really started working with practices, there's kind of a passive, maybe an automated sequence that every few months it's, hey, we haven't seen you in a little while. And while that's certainly better than nothing, what we're talking about here in terms of reactivating stalled patients is really some concentrated strategy and outreach to try to get them across that inertia of inaction that is keeping most of them out. Because there's really a couple of reasons primarily that people aren't getting into the dentist. One is it's just they're busy, they continue to put it off, and they're just it's not something that they're really avoiding. It's just isn't a high enough priority. However, there's another group where they know that there's some work that needs to be done, and either because of financial considerations or just kind of the dread of going into the dentist and having that work done, they're putting it off. Well, both of those personas can be targeted with messages that help overcome whatever it is that's keeping them from coming in. The message of just, hey, we haven't seen you for a while, it doesn't speak to the latter in any meaningful way. It doesn't overcome the dread of coming in and getting that work done. And even the person who's just kind of putting off, sure, it's a little bit of a nudge, but there's some opportunities to be a bit more intentional in that. So when we talk about reactivating stalled patients, we're really talking about being very intentional in reaching out to them. And the reason why it's important is you've already paid to acquire that patient. And so that money's already invested. This is about getting more revenue on money you've already spent, which, that increasing that ROI is always a good idea. It also, and it can be extraordinarily effective just numerically. A couple of examples. We ran a campaign for a gentleman or for a practice, and within the first few weeks, there were 57 additional appointments that were set from this campaign. So this is not a small issue, and it becomes kind of culturally something that you're doing. It also fills in so that there's less need to go out and acquire new patients, meaning you can cut off those channels or those campaigns that are producing low quality patients. So it's really a powerful lever, and it's also one that happens quickly. So that's why we put it at the top as pillar one, is it's a big mover for a lot of practices.
It does seem like we are having a few technical difficulties, so due to that, we will probably just cut this episode here, and then we'll, in the next episode, go into the 4 pillars of the Inside Out framework, where we can dive into what strategies are working and how holistically dentists are creating practices that grow sort of with that compounding flywheel effect. So if you've made it this far and you've watched us, especially on YouTube, where we've had some video technical difficulties, we appreciate it. Subscribe so you can be ready and notified when that next episode comes out about the 4 pillars. And find us on anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, Overcast, etc. And we wish you all the best with growing your practice. Let us know in the comments what's working for you now, and we'll see you in the next one.